The Rio Grande ran red with storm water and clay when Samuel Bridger pulled the girl from its churning depths. He'd been checking fence lines after 3 days of biblical rain when he spotted her, a dark head bobbing in the current, fingers clawing at the slick rocks of the bank. Without thinking, he'd spurred his horse into the shallows and caught her wrist just as she went under. She came up gasping, coughing muddy water, and Samuel nearly lost his grip from the shock of her size. The girl was massive, 6'5" if she was an inch, with shoulders like a longhorn bull and arms corded with muscle that would shame most men. Her deerskin dress clung to her frame, and her long black hair was plastered across a face that was beautiful in a way that made Samuel's chest tighten with something between fear and desire. He dragged her to the bank, and she collapsed onto the mud, retching and shaking. Apache, he realized. He could tell from the cut of her clothes, the turquoise beads woven into her hair. Jesus Christ! Having an Apache girl on his land was asking for trouble, the kind that ended with burning homesteads and bodies left for the buzzards. "You hurt?" he asked, speaking slowly. She looked up at him with eyes like obsidian chips, black and hard and knowing. When she spoke, her English was perfect, touched with only the faintest accent. "I owe you a debt," she said, struggling to her knees. Water streamed from her clothing, pooling in the red mud. "You saved my life. My name is Naiche. Samuel Bridger. And you don't owe me nothing. Just get yourself gone before someone sees you here." But Naiche arose to her full height, towering over him by half a foot, and placed one massive hand over her heart. "Among my people, a life debt is sacred. I will not dishonor my family or the spirits by leaving it unpaid." Samuel wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. Pride, maybe, or honor of a kind he rarely saw in the territory anymore, where most men would sell their mothers for a silver dollar and a bottle of rutgut. "Fine," he said. "Consider it paid. Now get." "No." Naiche's jaw set with stubborn determination. "I will stay until the debt is satisfied. My body is yours to use as you see fit, for labor, for protection, for whatever purpose you require. This is our way." The words hung in the humid air between them, laden with implications that made Samuel's mouth go dry. He was acutely aware of her size, her strength, the way her wet dress clung to curves that would make a saint reconsider his vows. And he was aware of his own loneliness. 3 years since Catherine died of the fever. 3 years of talking to his horse and his shadow in the empty rooms of his ranch house. "That's a damned foolish offer," he said roughly. "You don't know what kind of man I am." "I know you risked your life for a stranger," Naiche replied. "That tells me enough." Samuel gave her dry clothes, a pair of his old work pants that barely reached her calves and a shirt that stretched tight across her broad back. She moved around his ranch like she'd been born to it, sizing up his operation with an experienced eye. "Your fence is weak," she observed, pointing to the western pasture. "The posts are rotting. Another storm and you'll lose half your cattle." "I know that," Samuel snapped. "Been meaning to fix it, but there's only so many hours in a day and only one of me." Naiche nodded. "Tomorrow I will help. Tonight I will cook. You look like you've been eating beans from a can for too long." She wasn't wrong. That evening, Samuel watched in bemused silence as she took over his kitchen, preparing rabbit she'd caught with her bare hands. He'd seen her do it, watched her move through the brush with the silent grace of a predator, seasoned with herbs he didn't recognize. The meat was tender and smoky, better than anything he'd tasted in years. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" he asked around a mouthful. "My mother and the Mexican women at the mission where I was schooled." Her expression darkened. "Before they closed it down and sent us away." Samuel knew better to press. The Indian schools were a sore subject. places where they tried to beat the savage out of children, leaving behind broken people who belonged to neither world. He could see it in Naiche, the way she moved between languages, between cultures, never quite fitting anywhere. They ate in silence, punctuated only by the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of coyotes. When Samuel finally spoke, his voice was rougher than he intended. "You can't stay here. People see an Apache on my land, they'll come with torches and rope. Won't matter that you're a woman, won't matter that I saved you." "Let them come," Naiche said simply. "I'm not afraid of white men with fire." "Maybe you should be." She leaned forward, her face illuminated by the lamplight, and Samuel saw something fierce and wild in her eyes. "I have killed men before, Samuel Bridger, many men. When they came for my village, when they wanted to take the children to their schools and the women for their beds, I fought and I survived. The reason I was in the river is because I've been running for 3 weeks. There are soldiers looking for me, men who want to see me hanged." The word should have frightened him. Instead, Samuel felt a strange kinship settle into his bones. "What'd you do?" "I killed a captain. He was forcing himself on my sister. I caved in his skull with a rock." She said it matter-of-factly, without remorse. "So yes, I know the risk I bring to your door. But I also know you have enemies. I saw the burned barn when I approached. I saw the cattle with their throats slit. Someone wants you gone." Samuel's jaw clenched. The Davenport brothers, 3 sons of a cattle baron who'd decided Samuel's land would make a nice addition to their empire. They'd been pressuring him for months, and when he refused to sell, the harassment began. "The Davenports," he admitted. "They want my water rights. This is the only ranch for 50 miles with a reliable creek that don't dry up in summer." "Then you need me as much as I need you," Naiche said. "I will help you defend your land, and perhaps we can both survive long enough to find peace." It was a devil's bargain, and Samuel knew it, but as he looked at this fierce, damaged woman who'd crashed into his life like a flash flood, he found himself nodding. "All right, but we do this smart. You stay out of sight during the day, work at night, and if soldiers come, you run. I won't have your death on my conscience." Naiche smiled, and it transformed her face into something luminous. "Agreed. Now finish your dinner. Tomorrow we have much work to do." The days blurred into weeks. Naiche proved herself 10 times over. She could rope a steer with the best cowhands, could fix a fence line faster than any man Samuel had ever employed, and could track game through terrain that looked empty to his eyes. She was also, he discovered, educated. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch and she'd read from the books Catherine had collected. Shakespeare, Dickens, even some Byron that made Samuel's face heat when Naiche recited it in her low, smoky voice. But it was her size and strength that captivated him most. He'd watch her lift fence posts that would take 2 men to carry, had seen her wrestle a bull to the ground with her bare hands when it got ornery during branding. She was magnificent, and Samuel found his thoughts drifting to dangerous territory more often than he cared to admit. One night, drunk on whiskey and loneliness, he made a mistake. "Why'd you really offer yourself like that?" he asked. "That first day. My body is yours to use." You had to know how that sounded. Naiche had been mending a bridle, her large fingers surprisingly nimble with the leather. She looked up, and in the lamplight, her eyes were unreadable. "Among my people, there is no shame and honest work, no shame in the body. The missionaries tried to teach us their shame, their strange ideas about flesh and sin. But I am Apache. My body is a tool, a weapon, a vessel for my spirit. If you had wanted to use it for pleasure, that would have been acceptable payment for my life." "Jesus," Samuel breathed. "You're serious?" "I am always serious." She set down the bridle. "But I see you are not that kind of man. You look at me with hunger, yes. I feel your eyes on me when you think I don't notice. But you are controlled, honorable. Perhaps too honorable for your own good." Samuel felt heat crawl up his neck. A man has to have a code. even when that code makes him suffer? Naiche stood, and suddenly she was crossing the space between them, her presence overwhelming in the small room. She was close enough now that he could smell her, wood smoke and sage and something earthier, wilder. His heart hammered against his ribs. "This is a bad idea," he managed. "Most good things are," Naiche replied, and kissed him. He tasted like the wilderness, like storm water and copper and life. Samuel made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, forgetting for a moment that she could break him like kindling if she wanted. But Naiche was gentle despite her size, her calloused hands cradling his face like he was something precious. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel pressed his forehead to hers. "I can't promise you anything," he said hoarsely. "I can't protect you from what's coming, those soldiers." "I don't want your promises," Naiche interrupted. "I want your honesty. I want your fire. Give me this one thing, Samuel. Let me feel alive before the darkness comes." And God help him. He did. They were careful after that, conducting their affair in the darkness, in the privacy of Samuel's bedroom, where the outside world couldn't intrude. Naiche was unlike any woman Samuel had known, fierce and demanding, laughing when he tried to be gentle, urging him to match her strength. She left marks on him, crescents of her nails on his shoulders, bruises on his hips from her powerful thighs. And he gave as good as he got, discovering that beneath her warrior's exterior was a woman who craved touch, who'd been starved for softness in a world that had given her only violence. But the real world had a way of intruding on paradise. The Davenport brothers came on a Wednesday, 3 men on horseback with 6 hired guns backing them. Samuel saw them from the pasture, and his blood went cold. He'd sent Naiche to check the north fence line, but she'd be visible if they looked hard enough. He rode to meet them at the property line, his rifle across his saddle. "Bridger," Marcus Davenport said, the eldest of the brothers and the meanest, "we're giving you one last chance. Sell us this land or we take it. Simple as that. And I'm telling you the same thing I told you before. Go to hell." Marcus smiled, and it was like watching a snake bare its fangs. "That's a shame, truly, because we heard an interesting rumor. Heard you're harboring an Apache fugitive, a killer. Now that would be a violation of territorial law, wouldn't it? Could get you arrested, could get your land seized." Samuel's finger tightened on his rifle. "Don't know what you're talking about." "No? Then you won't mind if we search the place." "I mind plenty. Now get off my land." The standoff might have turned bloody right there if not for the sound of hoofbeats. Naiche came riding from the north, and Samuel's stomach dropped. She'd dressed in men's clothes, her hair tucked under a hat, but up close there'd be no hiding what she was. She rode up beside Samuel without a word, her own rifle held casually but with clear intent. The Davenport's men tensed, hands moving toward their guns. "That's a big boy you got there, Bridger," one of the hired guns said, squinting. Then his eyes widened. "Jesus Christ, that's a woman! That's the Apache woman from the wanted posters." All hell broke loose. The hired guns went for their weapons, and Naiche moved like lightning, her rifle barking 3 times in rapid succession. 2 men fell from their saddles, and a third grabbed his arm, howling. Samuel fired at the same instant, catching Marcus's horse in the chest. The animal went down screaming, pinning Marcus's leg. "Go!" Samuel shouted at Naiche, but she'd already dismounted, using her horse as cover while she reloaded. The firefight lasted maybe 3 minutes, but felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, 4 men were dead, 2 were wounded and running, and Marcus Davenport was trapped beneath his dying horse, his face white with pain and fury. "You're dead!" he spat at Samuel. "Both of you! My father will burn this whole county down to find you." Samuel approached slowly, his rifle trained on Marcus's head. "Maybe, but you won't be around to see it." "Samuel!" "No," Naiche said sharply. "Don't make this worse than it is." Worse, Samuel laughed, a wild, desperate sound. Woman, we just killed 4 men. There ain't no worse. We're outlaws now, same as you. Marcus sneered. So what are you gonna do, Bridger? Shoot me in cold blood? You're not that kind of man. Samuel looked at the cattle baron's son, at his smug, entitled face, and felt something snap inside him. 3 years of harassment, of threats, of watching everything he'd built be slowly destroyed by men with more money and fewer morals. He thought of Catherine, dead because they couldn't afford the medicine that might have saved her. He thought of all the small ranchers the Davenports had driven off their land. He shot Marcus Davenport in the head. The sound echoed across the pasture, sending up a flock of crows from the cottonwoods. Samuel lowered his rifle, feeling strangely hollow. Now we run, he said. They took what they could carry: food, water, ammunition, Samuel's savings hidden in a coffee tin. Naiche moved with practiced efficiency, transforming from a woman into a warrior in a matter of minutes. She wore her Apache clothing again, her hair braided tight, her face painted with ash and ochre in patterns Samuel didn't understand. "Where do we go?" he asked as they rode north, away from the ranch he'd built with his own hands. "Mexico, eventually, but first to my people, what's left of them. There's a band in the Sierra Madre that will shelter us." "Your people won't take kindly to a white man." Naiche glanced at him, her expression fierce and tender at once. "You saved my life. You gave me shelter when I had none, and you killed for me. That makes you family by Apache law. They will accept you, or they will answer to me." They rode hard for 3 days, sleeping in turns, always watching the horizon for pursuit. On the 4th night, they made camp in a box canyon, building a small fire between the rocks to hide the light. Samuel watched Naiche move around the camp, marveling at how natural she looked in this harsh landscape. She belonged here in a way he never would, as much a part of the desert as the creosote and mesquite. "Regret it yet?" she asked, catching him staring. "Killing Marcus? No. Losing my ranch? Every minute." Naiche sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "We could have let him live, called the sheriff, claimed self-defense. You know how that story ends, with you on a gallows and me without a ranch anyway." Samuel shook his head. "At least this way we're free." "Free," Naiche repeated, testing the word. "I'm not sure I remember what that feels like." Samuel took her hand, still strange to feel how much larger it was than his, how strong. "Then we'll figure it out together. That's worth something, isn't it?" She smiled, and in the firelight she looked almost peaceful. "Yes, that's worth everything." They reached the Apache encampment a week later, a hidden settlement deep in the mountains where the terrain was too rough for the army to pursue. Naiche's people greeted her with joy and wariness, their eyes sliding to Samuel with open suspicion. But when Naiche spoke, a rapid stream of Apache that Samuel couldn't follow, the mood shifted. An old man approached, his face mapped with wrinkles, his eyes sharp as obsidian. He studied Samuel for a long moment, then said in perfect English, "She says you killed to protect her. She says you sacrificed your home for her freedom. These are not small things." "I did what needed doing," Samuel replied. The white man rarely does what needs doing unless it benefits him." But the old man smiled. "You may stay, but you will work. You will earn your place among us as Naiche earned hers among your people." It was the hardest work Samuel had ever done. The Apache didn't coddle him or make allowances for his ignorance. He learned to move through the desert without leaving tracks, to find water where none seemed to exist, to survive on roots and insects when game was scarce. He learned their language slowly and clumsily, and learned to read the land the way they did, as a living thing with moods and intentions. And at night he and Naiche would lie together under the stars, Her massive frame curled around him like she was trying to shield him from the world. "Do you miss it?" she asked one night. "Your ranch? Your old life?" Samuel thought about it honestly. "Sometimes. But that life was lonely. I was just going through the motions, waiting to die. This," he gestured at the camp, at the mountains, at her, "this is living. Even if we're always running? Even if we can never go back? Especially then." He took her hand, still strange to feel how much larger it was than his, how strong. "Then we'll figure it out together. That's worth something, isn't it?" She smiled, and in the firelight she looked almost peaceful. "Yes, that's worth everything." The soldiers found them 6 months later, a company of cavalry led by a hard-eyed colonel who'd made his reputation hunting Apaches. They attacked at dawn, rifles cracking through the thin mountain air. Samuel fought alongside Naiche and her people, surprised by how natural it felt to be defending this place, these people who'd become his family. The battle was brutal and short. The Apache knew the terrain, knew how to turn the mountains into weapons. They rained rocks down on the soldiers, fired from hidden positions, disappeared into crevices too narrow for horses. By noon, the cavalry was retreating, leaving behind their dead and wounded. Samuel had taken a bullet in the side, nothing fatal, but painful as hell. Naiche found him propped against a rock, bleeding but grinning. "Still think this was a good trade?" she asked, ripping his shirt to examine the wound. "Best trade I ever made," he said, then winced as she probed the injury. "Jesus, woman, be gentle." "I am being gentle. If I wasn't, you'd be screaming." But her hands were tender as she bandaged him, her expression tight with worry. "We can't stay here. They'll be back with more men." "I know. So where to?" "South, deep into Mexico where the army can't follow. There are places there, hidden valleys where people like us can disappear." "People like us?" Samuel repeated. "What are we exactly?" Naiche looked at him and her smile was sad and knowing. "Outlaws, exiles, two people who don't fit anywhere except with each other." She was right, Samuel realized. He'd crossed a line the day he pulled her from the river, had set in motion a chain of events that destroyed his old life and created this new, strange existence. He should have regretted it, should have mourned what he'd lost. But looking at Naiche, this fierce, impossible woman who'd become his partner, his lover, his reason for drawing breath, he felt only gratitude. "Then let's disappear," he said. "Let's vanish so completely that no one ever finds us. Build something new where the world can't reach." "A ranch?" Naiche asked, teasing. "Maybe, with strong fences and good water, and a woman big enough to carry me over the threshold when I'm too old to walk." She laughed, bright and genuine, and helped him to his feet. Around them, the Apache were already breaking camp, preparing to move. They'd do this again and again, Samuel knew. Run and hide and fight and run again. It was the price of their freedom, the cost of choosing each other over everything else. But as they rode south into the unknown, Naiche's hand warm in his, Samuel found he didn't mind paying it. Some debts, he thought, were worth a lifetime to repay. They built their ranch in a valley so remote it didn't appear on any map, where the only law was the one they made for themselves. It wasn't much, a small cabin, a corral for horses, a garden that Naiche tended with surprising gentleness. But it was theirs, earned in blood and defended with steel. The Apache visited sometimes, bringing news from the north and warnings about soldiers. Samuel's Spanish improved until he could trade with the Mexican farmers in the lowlands, swapping horses for supplies and asking no questions about where things came from. And Naiche bloomed in this life, became softer without losing any of her strength. Samuel would watch her work, digging post holes, breaking horses, hunting deer, and marvel that this creature had chosen him, that she'd traded the possibility of returning to her people for a life with a white rancher who'd murdered a man to protect her. On their first anniversary, marked not by a date, but by the memory of the day Samuel pulled her from the river, they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "Do you ever wonder how things might have been different?" Samuel asked. "If I'd left you in that river? If you'd kept riding instead of offering to pay your debt?" "No," Naiche said simply. "There was only ever one path. The spirits brought us together for a reason." "What reason?" She considered this, her dark eyes thoughtful. "To remind us that there are things worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth becoming outlaws and exiles for." She took his hand, her fingers engulfing his. "I was drowning long before I fell into that river, Samuel. You saved me in more ways than one." "Funny," Samuel said, his throat tight. "I was going to say the same thing about you." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, two impossible people who'd found each other in the chaos of a violent world. In the morning there would be work, fences to mend, horses to break, always the threat of soldiers or bounty hunters forcing them to run again. But for now, there was only this: the weight of Naiche's hand in his, the stars emerging overhead, and the quiet knowledge that he'd finally found where he belonged. Not in a place, but in her. And that was worth everything.